The night in London was particularly bustling that August Friday. The lights of Oxford Street gleamed in the distance, but it was in the Mayfair district that the true gastronomic spectacle of London's elite was unfolding. The Essence restaurant occupied the top of a restored historic building with panoramic views of the city that never sleeps. With 3 Michelin stars and a waiting list that stretched for 6 months, it was the place where the powerful sealed multi-million-pound deals between glasses of French wine and dishes crafted by an award-winning Catalan chef. Marina Olsen adjusted the impeccable black apron over the crisp white dress that comprised the house uniform. Her brown hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her green eyes reflected a tranquility that contrasted with the bustle of the kitchen in the background. At 28, she was one of Essence's most sought-after waitresses, known for her elegant demeanor and attention to detail. What no one there knew was that this woman who served tables with such grace carried a story on her back far different from what she appeared. The 9 o'clock reservation was special. The manager, a nervous Italian named Paul, had gathered the entire team earlier to give precise instructions. A Middle Eastern magnate, owner of one of the largest oil fortunes in the Persian Gulf, would be dining there with his partners to close an infrastructure investment deal in the United Kingdom. The estimated value of the business exceeded £500 million. Paul emphasized that everything should be perfect, impeccable, memorable. When the clock struck 9 in the evening, the doors of the private elevator opened. Khalid al-Rashid entered the dining room as if taking possession of conquered territory. Tall, approximately 45 years old, he wore an Italian suit that cost more than many Brits would earn in a year. His dark eyes scanned the room with the arrogance of someone accustomed to being the richest man in any room he entered. Behind him, 3 men accompanied him, 2 younger Arabs who appeared to be advisors, and a grey-haired German whom Marina recognized as Henry Miller, a European investor with extensive business in the Middle East. Paul practically ran to them, bowing in exaggerated courtesies. Marina observed the scene from afar, awaiting the signal to approach. She knew this type of client well. In the past 2 years serving at Essence, she had learned to identify the patterns, the gestures, the silent hierarchies established between the powerful and everyone else. Khalid was led to the best table, near the glass windows that offered a stunning view of the illuminated city. Before even sitting down, he was already on the phone, speaking loudly in Arabic, completely ignoring Paul, who was trying to present the evening's tasting menu. His gestures were expansive, his voice dominated the space, and he seemed completely oblivious to the fact that other people were dining there. Marina received Paul's nod. It was her turn. She took a deep breath, picked up the tablet with the digital menu, and walked towards the table with the posture she had learned in the restaurant's training. Each step was measured, each movement conveyed professionalism. Good evening. Gentlemen, welcome to Essence. I am Marina and I will have the pleasure of serving you tonight. May I start by offering you something to drink while you review the menu? Khalid didn't even look at her. He continued talking on the phone, laughing loudly at something his interlocutor had said. The 2 Arab advisors exchanged glances, visibly embarrassed. Henry, the German, gave Marina a polite nod, as if apologizing for his host's behavior. Marina waited. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. The phone conversation showed no signs of ending. She could feel the stares of other waiters, of Paul in the background, all waiting to see how she would handle the situation. Finally, with the delicacy of someone who doesn't want to interrupt, but needs to do her job, she took a step forward. "Excuse me, sir, when you're ready, I will be happy to take your drink order." It was then that Khalid hung up the phone, but he didn't look at Marina. Instead, he turned to his partners and, in classical Arabic, with a sneer on his lips, began to speak. His voice was loud enough for Marina to hear every word perfectly. "These British women are as beautiful as they are empty. Look at her. She probably wouldn't even know how to locate Dubai on a map, much less understand when she should be quiet and just serve. They are trained to smile and look elegant, but inside there is nothing but futility. That's why I prefer to do business only with men who understand the real value of things." One of the advisors tried to hide a laugh. The other lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. Henry frowned, his expression showing disapproval, but he said nothing, and Khalid continued, now gesturing towards Marina as if she were a decorative object. These Western waitresses think a starched uniform and a smile make them equal to us. They don't realize that there are useful people and invisible people in this world. She belongs to the second category. She exists only to serve and then disappear. Marina remained still, the tablet still in her hands. Her face showed no emotion. There was no anger, no hurt, no surprise, just a profound serenity that came from a place Khalid al-Rashid could never imagine. Because what that arrogant billionaire didn't know, what he couldn't even suspect while despising her in his own language, was that Marina Olsen understood every word he had said. Every insult, every disparagement, every syllable loaded with contempt had reached her ears with perfect clarity. Marina's heart beat faster, not from nervousness, but from a decision crystallizing within her. For 2 years, she had swallowed silent humiliations. For 2 years, she had smiled at clients who treated her like furniture. For 2 years, she had accepted her place in that world of blatant inequalities because she needed the money, because her mother depended on her, because the bills didn't pay themselves. But something in that moment was different. Perhaps it was Khalid's absolute arrogance. Perhaps it was the accumulated fatigue of months serving people who saw her as invisible. Perhaps it was simply the fact that she had spent too long hiding who she really was. Marina took a step forward. Her voice, when it emerged, was soft as silk, but carried the weight of years of study, of dedication, of a lifetime built on knowledge and respect for different cultures. And it was in classical Arabic, with a perfect accent that rivaled his own, that she replied, "Thank you for the compliments on my intelligence, Mr. Al-Rashid. It is comforting to know that men of your position have such well-founded opinions about people they have just met." The effect was instantaneous. Khalid froze, his tanned face turning pale in a matter of seconds. The two advisors' eyes widened, their mouths opening in silent shock. Henry, the German, let out a short, muffled laugh, his eyes sparkling with something that looked like approval. Marina continued, her voice maintaining the same polite tone, but now with a thread of steel cutting through the words. "I must correct you on one point. I spent 4 years studying at the American University of Dubai, where I specialized in Middle Eastern cultures and languages. My classical Arabic was refined by professors who also educated members of royal families. As for the Gulf dialects, I can converse in any of them with the same fluency as a native speaker." The silence that fell over the table was so thick that Marina could hear the sound of conversations from other tables around them. Khalid al-Rashid was completely motionless, his eyes fixed on her as if seeing a ghost. Henry Miller couldn't suppress a wide smile, and one of the Arab advisors murmured something in a low voice that sounded like a prayer. Marina knew she had crossed a line. She knew she could be fired at that very moment. Paul was probably already observing the scene from afar, trying to decipher what was happening, but something inside her refused to back down. Not after years of building expertise that was now wasted serving tables. Not after having sacrificed so much to master a culture that this man thought she didn't even know. She continued, now quoting an ancient Arabic proverb, her perfect pronunciation making each word resonate with authority. As the old desert saying goes, material wealth can buy palaces, but it will never buy character. A truly rich man is one who enriches the lives of others, not one who diminishes them. Henry clapped slowly 3 times, his German accent laden with admiration when he finally spoke. "Extraordinary. Mr. Al-Rashid, her accent is impeccable. I lived 5 years in Abu Dhabi and rarely heard a non-native speak classical Arabic with such precision." One of the advisors, the youngest, dared to nod in agreement. Khalid remained silent, his face now showing a mixture of shock and something that might have been shame, though he clearly struggled not to show it. Marina took a deep breath. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but she maintained control. When she spoke again, it was in Arabic, but her tone had changed. There was no more provocation, only a serene dignity that came from a deep place. "Mr. Al-Rashid, I will serve you tonight with all the excellence that this restaurant represents. Not because I need your approval or recognition, but because I am proud of my work, regardless of who is sitting in front of me. The quality of my service does not depend on clients having the basic decency to treat other human beings with respect. Then, with a smooth transition that demonstrated her linguistic mastery, she returned to English, her tone professional and courteous. "Now, gentlemen, may I offer you something to drink? We have an exceptional selection of wines that pair perfectly with tonight's tasting menu." Henry was the first to react, ordering a specific red wine with a smile on his lips. The advisors followed suit, their voices low and respectful. Khalid still hadn't moved, his eyes still fixed on Marina, but finally he murmured something that sounded like a request for mineral water. Marina noted everything precisely, bowed slightly in a polite curtsy, and moved away from the table. Her steps were firm, her posture erect. Only when she reached the service area, away from the client's gazes, did she allow her hands to tremble slightly. "What did you do there?" Paul appeared beside her, his eyes wide. I saw that man's expression change completely. "What happened?" Marina smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I just did my job, Paul. I'll get their drinks now." She offered no further explanations. Not at that moment. There were orders to process, drinks to serve, an entire night ahead. But something had changed. A door that had been locked inside her for 2 long years had opened, and Marina knew she couldn't close it again. The dinner proceeded in a tense silence at that specific table. Marina served each dish with impeccable professionalism, explaining the ingredients, the preparation techniques, the flavor combinations. She spoke in English, maintaining the appropriate professional distance. Khalid barely touched his food. His eyes followed her every time she approached. But he didn't say a single word throughout the meal. Henry, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. With each dish served, he asked Marina questions, and when she mentioned having studied in Dubai, he wanted to know more. It was a brief, professional conversation, but Marina noticed the sparkle of genuine respect in the German's eyes. The other tables in the restaurant continued at their normal pace. Business people discussed mergers and acquisitions, couples celebrated anniversaries, foreign tourists photographed each dish that arrived. But Marina felt that something fundamental had shifted that night. It was as if a version of herself that had been dormant had awakened, and now refused to go back to sleep. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate and red fruit creation that was the chef's signature, Marina also brought the bill. Khalid took it without looking at the amount, inserted his black card into the machine, and authorized the payment. Then, to Marina's surprise, he left €500 notes on the table. A €500 tip, more than she earned in an entire week of work. But he said nothing. He didn't look at her. He simply stood up, his advisors immediately following him. Henry lingered for a moment, approaching Marina discreetly. "You taught him a lesson worth more than any MBA," he said in a low voice in English. "Men like him rarely find someone who puts them in their place. I hope you find a position that does justice to your talents. This restaurant is wasting a precious resource." And then he too left, leaving Marina alone with those euro notes on the table. She picked them up, feeling the weight of the paper in her hands. €500. Money that could pay overdue bills, buy her mother's medicine, give her strained budget some breathing room. But as she looked at those notes, something inside her rebelled. She knew that kind of tip. It wasn't generosity, it was guilt. It was a rich man's attempt to buy her silence, to turn her humiliation into a commercial transaction. It was the money powerful people threw at problems to make them disappear. Marina put the notes in her apron pocket and finished her shift. It was almost 2 in the morning when she finally changed clothes in the staff changing room. The impeccable uniform was replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. She picked up her bag, waved to her colleagues who were still cleaning the dining room, and went down to the ground floor of the building. That's when she saw the car. A black limousine was parked in front of the restaurant, and standing beside it, smoking a cigar, was Khalid al-Rashid. He saw her at the same instant. He threw the cigar on the ground, extinguished it with his Italian shoe, and walked towards her. Marina felt her heart quicken, but she stood firm. Khalid stopped a few meters away. Under the streetlights, he looked different, smaller somehow. The arrogance had been replaced by something she couldn't quite decipher. "Are you waiting for me, Mr. al-Rashid?" Marina asked in English. her voice neutral. He hesitated, then replied, his voice hoarse. "I need to talk to you." Marina crossed her arms. "It's 2 a.m. I'm tired and need to take 2 buses to get home. If you have something to say, please be brief." Khalid took another step forward. There was something in his eyes that Marina hadn't seen before, something that might have been remorse. "What I said today was unforgivable. I treated you as if you were invisible, less than human, and you showed me that I am the ignorant one. Not you." Marina didn't reply immediately. She watched him, this man who had built an empire on oil, who moved billions, who had probably never been confronted in this way in his entire life. "My humiliation was public," Khalid continued, "and just. But I can't just leave without trying to correct it." Marina took the euro notes from her pocket and held out her hand towards him. "Then start by returning this." Khalid looked at the money, confused. "It's a tip. You deserve it." "I don't want your guilt money," Marina replied, her voice firm. "If you truly want to correct what you did, learn this lesson. All human beings deserve respect, regardless of the uniform they wear or the job they do. The greatest ignorance is not to be unaware of a language or a culture. It is not knowing how to treat people with basic dignity." Khalid took the money back, his hands trembling slightly. Marina noticed with surprise that this man who commanded an empire was visibly shaken. She had seen powerful people before, had served politicians, celebrities, world-renowned business people, but she had never seen one of them so genuinely disconcerted. "You are right," he said finally, putting the notes in his pocket. "Everything I said was a projection of my own insecurity. I divide the world into useful and invisible people because it's easier than recognizing the humanity in every person who crosses my path." Marina didn't expect that confession. She expected anger, perhaps more arrogance, possibly a veiled threat of lawsuits or work complications. But not that. Not that raw vulnerability. "Why is a woman with your education serving tables?" Khalid asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "You studied at one of the best universities in the Middle East. You speak Arabic like a native. What happened?" Marina thought about not answering. She thought about simply turning her back and going home, leaving that bizarre encounter behind. But something in his sincerity, in the way he awaited her answer without demanding anything, made her hesitate. "Life happened," she said finally. "I returned to the UK full of plans. But the job market for Middle Eastern culture specialists isn't exactly vibrant in London. I sent resumes to consultancies, international trade companies, even embassies. But without prior professional experience, without connections, the doors remained closed." She paused, looking at the illuminated city around them. "My mother fell ill shortly after I returned. Her pension barely covered her medicine. I had college debts, accumulated bills, overdue rent. Essence was hiring, paid reasonably well with tips, and I needed to eat. Sometimes life doesn't follow the plans we make at graduation." Khalid was silent for a long moment. A taxi passed them, honking at someone further ahead. The night wind carried the smell of food from a nearby restaurant that was still open. "I'm going to offer you something," Khalid said finally. "And before you refuse, thinking it's charity or guilt, let me be clear. This is business. Pure and simple business." Marina watched him cautiously. "My company is expanding operations in the UK. We are investing in infrastructure, renewable energy, partnerships with local companies, but we constantly face intercultural communication problems. My Western executives don't understand the nuances of the Arab world. My Arab executives stumble over British sensitivities. We lose deals due to misunderstandings that could be avoided." He took a step forward, his eyes meeting hers. "I need someone who understands both worlds, someone who can bridge different cultures, who can train my teams, who can alert me when I'm about to make a monumental mistake, as I did today. I am offering you a position as Cultural Relations Manager in my company, a salary of £70,000 per month, full benefits and the opportunity to use everything you've studied." Marina felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. £70,000 a month. She currently earned that in 4-month serving tables if she was lucky with tips. "That's absurd," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You don't know me. You don't know if I'm competent, if I'm reliable, if I can really do what you're describing." "I know you master classical Arabic and Gulf dialects perfectly," Khalid replied. "I know you studied for 4 years at a prestigious university. I know you had the courage to confront me publicly when I disrespected you, something men in my circle rarely do. And I know you refused €500 because your principles are worth more than easy money. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Marina shook her head, trying to process everything. "I need to think about it. I need time." "You have 48 hours, Khalid said, taking a business card from his pocket. "This is my direct contact. When you decide, call this number. If you accept, you can start on Monday. If you refuse, I respect your decision and will never bother you again." He placed the card in her hand and, before Marina could respond, bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Good night, Marina Olsen, and thank you for giving me the most valuable lesson I've received in years." Then he got into the limousine and left, leaving Marina alone on the sidewalk, holding a business card that could completely change her life. The journey home was a blur. Marina took the first bus practically on autopilot, her mind spinning in circles. She sat near the window, watching the city pass outside, the streets gradually changing from affluent neighborhoods to simpler ones as she moved away from Mayfair. £70,000 a month. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning. It was the difference between surviving and truly living. It was being able to afford better treatment for her mother, pay off debts, maybe even save for the future. But accepting meant working for a man who had humiliated her just hours before. It meant trusting that this sudden transformation was genuine and not just a calculated move. It meant risking her dignity again. Marina got off the second bus around 3 in the morning and walked the 2 blocks to the small flat she shared with her mother. The building was old, with cracks in the exterior walls and faded paint. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, her feet aching after hours standing at the restaurant. When she opened the door, she found her mother, Mrs. Celia, still awake in the living room, watching a rerun of a soap opera on TV with the volume low. At 62, Celia Olsen still maintained the upright posture she had cultivated in her years as an executive secretary before arthritis forced her early retirement. "Daughter, are you all right?" Celia asked immediately, noticing something different on Marina's face. "Did something happen at work?" Marina sat beside her mother on the worn sofa, and then, for the first time since everything had happened, she felt the emotions she had suppressed begin to surface. "Mum," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "something happened today, something that could change everything." And she told her. She told about Khalid, about the insults, about her reply in Arabic, about the confrontation on the street. She told about the impossible job offer, about the salary that seemed surreal, about the decision she needed to make in 48 hours. Celia listened in silence, her arthritic hands holding Marina's. When her daughter finished, she remained quiet for a long moment, her wise eyes studying Marina's face. "You're scared," she said finally. "Not that it's a trap or a trick. You're scared that it's real and that you deserve it." Marina felt tears burn her eyes. "I spent 2 years believing that all those years of study were wasted, that I had made wrong choices, followed the wrong path. I convinced myself that serving tables was all I could do." Celia squeezed her daughter's hands tightly. "My dear, you never wasted anything. Every hour you spent studying, every sacrifice you made, all of it prepared you for this exact moment. That man is not offering charity. He recognized your worth, even if it took a public humiliation to open his eyes. But what if he hasn't really changed? What if it's just wounded pride? What if he goes back to treating me that way?" "Then you leave," Celia said firmly. "You leave with your head held high, knowing you tried. But if you don't take this opportunity out of fear, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been." Marina hugged her mother, smelling the familiar scent of lavender that Celia always wore. The next 48 hours were the longest of Marina's life. She went to work on Saturday night as usual, serving tables with the same efficiency as before, but her mind was elsewhere. Paul pulled her aside during the break. curious about what had happened with the Arab billionaire, but Marina was evasive, saying only that there had been a misunderstanding that was resolved. On Sunday, her day off, Marina did what she always did when she needed to think clearly. She went to the municipal library on Oxford Street, that sanctuary of knowledge where she had spent countless hours in previous years, studying for exams she had never passed, reading about distant cultures, dreaming of a different life. She sat at her favorite table near the windows overlooking the busy avenue and opened her old laptop. She researched Al Rashid Energy Corporation. What she found was impressive and intimidating in equal measure. The company had operations in 17 countries, an annual revenue exceeding $20 billion, and was indeed aggressively expanding in the British renewable energy market. There were articles about Khalid in international business magazines, descriptions of him as a ruthless visionary, a brutal negotiator, a man who had transformed his inherited fortune into something 3 times larger through risky bets and impeccable execution. But there were also mentions of labor lawsuits, criticisms about working conditions in some of his operations, accusations that he treated employees as disposable resources. Marina closed the laptop, her decision still not made. She walked through the library, her fingers tracing the spines of books on Arab culture, linguistics, international relations. All of it represented years of her life, years of passion, dedication, genuine love for understanding worlds different from her own. She thought of her mother, taking expensive arthritis medicine that consumed half of her meager pension. She thought of the overdue electricity bills, the rent that always threatened to become a problem. She thought of how many times she had eaten plain pasta for a whole week to save money. But she also thought of dignity, of self-respect, of not selling herself short. When the clock struck 5 on Sunday afternoon, she took out her phone and dialed the number on the card Khalid had given her. Her heart pounded as she waited for the call to connect. Marina Olsen. Khalid's voice sounded from the other end, surprisingly warm. "I was expecting your call." Marina took a deep breath. "I have one condition," she said without preamble. "If you accept it, I accept the position." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm listening. If at any point, for any reason, you treat me without the respect any human being deserves, if you diminish me, if you make me feel invisible as you did that night, I will leave immediately. Without notice, without a transition period. I will simply walk away. This is the only non-negotiable condition." More silence. Marina held her breath. Then she heard something she didn't expect. Khalid laughing, not a scoffing laugh, but something genuine, almost relieved. "I accept your condition with an addition," he said. "I not only accept that you leave if I disrespect you, I insist that you do so. And furthermore, I need you to confront me whenever you notice that I am treating any employee the way I treated you. I need you to be my conscience because clearly my own is not functioning properly." It was Marina's turn to be silent, processing that unexpected answer. "Then we have a deal," she said finally. "We have a deal. Can you start tomorrow, Monday? My office is in Canary Wharf. I'll send my chauffeur to pick you up at 8 in the morning. Please give me your address." Marina hesitated. The idea of a private chauffeur picking her up from her humble neighborhood seemed absurd, but then she remembered her mother's words. No fear, no shame of who she was or where she came from. She gave him the address. That night, after calling Paul to resign, an incredulous Paul who oscillated between congratulations and lamentations for the loss of his best waitress, Marina could barely sleep. She lay looking at the ceiling of the small bedroom, listening to her mother's regular breathing in the next room, trying to believe that it was all real. Monday arrived with an impeccable blue sky. Marina chose her only suit, bought years before for job interviews that never led to anything. It was black, simple but well cut. She tied her hair in a professional bun, applied discreet makeup, and at 8 o'clock sharp went downstairs to find a black Mercedes waiting in front of the building. The chauffeur, a middle-aged gentleman named Mr. Joseph, was British and extremely polite. During the drive through the city, he explained that he had been working for Al Rashid for 3 months and that Mr. Al Rashid was genuinely trying to change his management style. "He even apologized to me last week, Mr. Joseph said, still sounding surprised, "for being rude when I got lost on the way to a meeting. He said he was stressed and that it was no excuse to take it out on me. In 20 years of driving for executives, I've never seen anything like it." Marina absorbed this information, feeling a small hope grow. Perhaps the change was real. Perhaps that night at the restaurant really had been a turning point. Al Rashid Energy Corporation's office occupied 3 floors of a mirrored glass building in Canary Wharf. The reception was all white marble and dark wood, with employees moving with silent efficiency. Marina was greeted by an assistant named Julia, who took her to the 23rd floor. Khalid was waiting for her in a meeting room with panoramic views of London. He was wearing a navy blue suit, but today there was something different in his posture. Less arrogance, more uncertainty. "Marina," he said, extending his hand, "welcome to Al Rashid Energy Corporation." She shook his hand, firm and professional. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Al Rashid." "Khalid," he corrected. "Here you call me Khalid. Excessive formalities create barriers, and I need you to be direct with me." The first few days were a roller coaster of discoveries. Marina was introduced to the executive team, a mix of Brits, Arabs, and Europeans. Her role was explained. She would be responsible for training all employees in cultural sensitivity, reviewing important communications to ensure no intercultural misunderstandings, and advising Khalid directly on issues related to negotiations involving cultural differences. She received her own office, small but elegant, with a partial view of the city, a state-of-the-art computer, a direct line phone, and a salary that was deposited in advance into her account so she could settle in. The first thing Marina did with the money was take her mother to a private doctor specializing in arthritis. The treatment he recommended was expensive, but now she could afford it. Seeing the relief on Celia's face as the pain subsided for the first time in years was worth every second of uncertainty Marina had felt. At work, she dove in head first. She created an intercultural training program that started with top executives and would gradually expand to the entire company. She reviewed contracts and commercial proposals, finding and correcting linguistic nuances that could have caused problems. And she observed Khalid attentively. The man was genuinely trying to change. She saw him apologize to a secretary he had interrupted during a call. She saw him ask for the opinion of junior employees in strategic meetings. She saw him implement an open-door policy, where any employee could schedule a time to speak directly with him. But she also saw the moments when the old Khalid threatened to resurface. The impatience when something didn't go as planned. The harsh tone when someone made a mistake. The tendency to dominate conversations without leaving room for others. And whenever she saw this, Marina intervened, sometimes with a meaningful look during a meeting, sometimes with a private conversation afterward, sometimes simply touching his arm and shaking her head. To her surprise, Khalid accepted these interventions. More than that, he seemed to value them. 3 months passed like a whirlwind. Marina settled completely into her new role, quickly becoming indispensable to the company's operations. Her cultural trainings were eagerly awaited by employees, who appreciated her practical and example-filled approach. She mediated delicate negotiations with Persian Gulf partners, averted 3 potential diplomatic disasters, and even suggested modifications to contracts that saved the company millions of pounds. But something else was happening, something Marina initially tried to ignore. Khalid began seeking her out for conversations that went beyond the professional. It started with questions about Arab culture during lunch. Then it evolved into discussions about literature, philosophy, about the differences and similarities between Eastern and Western thought. He lent her books by classical Arab poets, asking for her interpretations. She recommended British authors to him, and was surprised when he actually read them and returned with insightful comments. Marina realized she was getting to know a very different Khalid from the arrogant billionaire of that first night. This Khalid was curious, questioning, surprisingly vulnerable when he spoke about the pressures of managing a business empire, inherited at 23 after his father's sudden passing. This Khalid admitted his flaws, his fears, his regrets, and Marina, despite all her caution, despite all the mental alarms that went off, began to feel something she shouldn't feel. It wasn't just professional respect. It wasn't just admiration for his ability to change. It was something deeper, more dangerous. One night, working late on an important proposal for a solar energy consortium, Khalid entered her office with 2 cups of Arabic coffee that he himself had prepared. "I thought you might need this," he said, placing a cup on her desk. Real Arabic coffee, not that watery version they serve in the canteen. Marina accepted the cup, inhaling the rich aroma spiced with cardamom. "You learned to make Arabic coffee correctly," she observed, impressed. "Most men of your generation leave that to the women in the family or to servants." Khalid sat in the chair opposite her desk, a sad smile on his lips. "My grandmother taught me when I was 10. She said a man who doesn't know how to make his own coffee is a man who will always depend on others for basic things. I forgot that lesson for many years, until you reminded me." They were silent for a moment, drinking coffee and looking at the illuminated city through the window. "Marina," Khalid said finally, his voice more serious, "may I ask you a personal question?" She nodded cautiously. "Why have you never married? A woman with your intelligence, your beauty, your strength of character. Surely there were no lack of suitors." Marina laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "When you spend 4 years in the Middle East studying, focused exclusively on mastering a culture, there isn't much time left for relationships. And when I returned to the UK, I was so busy trying to survive that romance was the last item on my priority list." She paused, then decided to be honest. "And perhaps because I never found someone who truly saw me, who looked beyond the surface and recognized the value of what's inside." Khalid observed her for a long moment, his dark eyes intense. "I see you, Marina. And I don't just see you. I deeply admire who you are." The air in the office seemed to grow denser. Marina felt her heart race but forced herself to maintain professional composure. "Mr. Al-Rashid, Khalid, we need to maintain appropriate boundaries. We are colleagues." Khalid nodded slowly but didn't avert his gaze. "You're right. Forgive me if I overstepped any boundaries. Good night, Marina." He left, leaving her alone with her coffee and her turbulent thoughts. Marina knew she was in dangerous territory. There was a fundamental power imbalance between them. He was her boss, a billionaire, someone who could destroy her career with a word. Getting emotionally involved would be madness, but in the following days, she realized she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he truly listened when she spoke, the way his eyes lit up when she explained some cultural nuance he didn't know, the genuine effort he made to be a better person. It was Henry Miller who finally forced the issue. The German investor visited the London office for a strategic meeting and at the end of the day invited Marina to dinner. They went to a discreet German restaurant in Notting Hill. Henry ordered beer and schnitzel and got straight to the point as soon as the waiter moved away. "You and Khalid," he said bluntly, "there's something going on there, and you two are fighting it like scared teenagers." Marina felt her face flush. "Henry, this is completely inappropriate." "Nonsense," Henry interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "I've known Khalid for 15 years. I've seen him build his empire with relentless determination. I've seen him make decisions that changed entire industries, but never in all these years have I seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." Marina took a sip of water, trying to buy time. "He's my boss. There's a fundamental power imbalance. It would be completely unethical." Henry shook his head. "It would be unethical if he were using his position to coerce or manipulate you. But what I see is a man in love trying desperately to respect your boundaries, and a woman who is equally in love trying to convince herself that she isn't." Marina didn't reply. She couldn't, because he was right. "Khalid changed because of you," Henry continued. "And I don't just mean his manners in the office. He's becoming the man he always could have been, but chose not to be out of fear or arrogance or whatever. You awakened something in him that was dormant. This is a rare gift, Marina." "But what if it doesn't work out?" Marina heard herself ask. "What if it's just a temporary passion and then everything falls apart? I would lose my job, my stability, everything." Henry smiled. "Then you find another job. With your qualifications and the experience you're gaining here, companies would line up to hire you. But if you let fear dictate your choices, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if." That night, lying in her bed in the now more comfortable flat she had rented for herself and her mother, Marina finally admitted the truth to herself. She was in love with Khalid al-Rashid. Deeply, irrevocably in love. The question was what to do with it. 2 weeks later, during a business trip to Dubai, where Marina accompanied Khalid to facilitate negotiations with local partners, everything changed. It was the last night before they returned to the UK. The negotiations had been a resounding success, with a $200 million contract signed. Khalid invited Marina to dinner at his favorite restaurant in the city, a discreet place that served traditional Gulf cuisine. They talked about everything but work, about childhood, dreams, fears. Khalid spoke about the pressure of being the only son in a powerful family, about how he had never felt free to just be himself. Marina shared her own struggles about feeling she never fully belonged anywhere, neither to the Arab world she had studied, nor to the UK where she was born. When dessert arrived, Khalid was quiet for a long moment, looking at their hands intertwined on the table. "Marina," he said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I need to say something, and I need you to just listen until the end before responding." She nodded, her heart pounding. "I am in love with you," Khalid said, the words coming out in a rush, "and I know this complicates everything. I know I'm your boss, that there's a power imbalance, that you have every reason in the world to say no, but I needed you to know. You saved me from myself, Marina. You saved me from becoming a man my own children would be afraid to disappoint instead of genuinely love." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "You taught me that human worth is not measured in dollars or barrels of oil. That respect is not something you give only to people of your social standing. That being vulnerable is not weakness, but courage. You made me want to be a better man, not out of obligation, but because you deserve someone better than the man I was." Marina felt tears burn her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of something much more complex. "Khalid, Wait," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. If you don't feel the same, I completely understand and respect that. Our professional relationship will not change. You have my word. But if there is any chance, no matter how small, that you might feel something for me, I want to explore that. Not as your boss, but as a man who met an extraordinary woman and doesn't want to let her slip away." Marina wiped away the tears that had started to fall. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of the cultural differences. Scared of what people will think. Scared that this is just intensity and not real love. Scared of losing everything I've built if it doesn't work out." She paused, then looked directly into his eyes. "But despite all that fear, I also feel something for you. Something I tried to deny and repress but couldn't. You are no longer the arrogant man who insulted me that night at the restaurant. You have transformed into someone I deeply respect. And at some point, without realizing when, that respect turned into something more." The smile that lit up Khalid's face was transformative. He reached across the table and took her hands in his. "Then let's take it slow," he said. "No pressure, no impossible expectations. Let's figure this out together, one day at a time." And so they did. The following months were challenging in ways neither of them had anticipated. When news of the relationship spread, there were reactions. Khalid's conservative family in Dubai was shocked. A British woman, not Muslim, a woman who worked. His mother practically disowned him in a tumultuous call. His uncles questioned his judgment, saying he was being controlled by emotions and not by reason. On Marina's side, Mrs. Celia had her own concerns. She had read stories about intercultural marriages that failed, about women who left their lives to move to the Middle East and then felt trapped. She feared for her daughter, even recognizing that Khalid seemed genuinely transformed. There were also practical challenges. Khalid needed to travel constantly to Dubai, leaving Marina alone in London for weeks. The cultural differences, which seemed romantic and interesting at first, sometimes created misunderstandings. Khalid still struggled with certain conditionings from his upbringing about gender roles. Marina sometimes felt suffocated by his intensity, but they worked on it. They talked honestly about every problem. They went to couples therapy with a therapist specializing in intercultural relationships. They established clear boundaries and expectations, and slowly, sometimes painfully, they built something solid. Marina met Khalid's family on a tense trip to Dubai. She was received coldly by his mother, with curiosity by his sisters, with distrust by his uncles. But she was not intimidated. She spoke fluent Arabic with them, demonstrated deep knowledge of their culture, but also maintained her British identity with pride. Gradually, especially Khalid's sisters, began to respect her. Khalid in turn won over Mrs. Celia through genuine gestures. He paid for experimental arthritis treatment for her in the United States, but more importantly, he treated her with deep respect, asking for her blessing before proposing marriage to Marina, listening to her advice, including her in important decisions. 2 years after that first night at the restaurant, Khalid made a special reservation. Essence, the same restaurant where everything had begun, was rented for an entire evening just for the two of them. Marina arrived not knowing what to expect. When she entered the dining room, she found only one table set. The same table where Khalid had humiliated her and where she had defended herself with dignity. Khalid was waiting there, wearing an impeccable suit, but his eyes showed a vulnerability that was entirely new. "This table," he said as he led her to sit, "is where I made one of the worst mistakes of my life. It's where I judged you without knowing you, where I diminished you based solely on stupid prejudices and arrogance. But it's also where you taught me the greatest lesson of my life." He walked around the table and, to Marina's shock, knelt beside her. "Marina Olsen, you taught me that a person's true worth is not measured by the money in their bank account, but by the character in their heart. You transformed me from a man who divided the world into useful and invisible into someone who finally understands that every person has inherent dignity." He took a small velvet box from his pocket. "Will you marry me? Not because I'm rich, not because I can offer a comfortable life, but because I love who you are, because I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, growing with you, building a better world by your side." Marina looked at the ring, a green emerald surrounded by diamonds the same color as her eyes. She looked at the man kneeling before her, so different from the arrogant billionaire who had insulted her in that very place 2 years before, and without hesitation she replied, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding was a fusion of cultures, held both in the UK and in Dubai, with ceremonies that respected both traditions. Khalid's family, especially his mother, finally accepted Marina when they saw how much she had transformed him. Mrs. Celia walked her daughter down the aisle, tears of joy in her eyes. 5 years after the wedding, Marina and Khalid lived between two worlds. They spent 6 months a year in London, 6 in Dubai. They had 2 children, Lucas and Layla, who grew up bilingual and bicultural, learning to value both heritages. Al Rashid Energy Corporation had transformed under Marina's influence. Khalid implemented revolutionary policies of respect and dignity in the workplace. Salaries were increased, working conditions improved, professional development programs were created. The company maintained its profitability, but now it was also known as one of the best places to work in the energy sector. Marina had become Director of Cultural Relations, not just for Khalid's company, but a consultant for several other international corporations. She wrote a book on intercultural communication that became a reference in business schools. She lectured around the world on how true cultural understanding can transform not just businesses but lives. Every year, on the anniversary of that first encounter, they returned to Essence. The restaurant management, knowing the story, had placed a discreet plaque at the table in English and Arabic, "Where arrogance met dignity and the world changed for 2 courageous souls." On this specific anniversary, the 5th since the proposal, Marina and Khalid sat at the table with their children. Lucas, 4 years old, was fascinated by the plaque, tracing his little fingers over the Arabic letters he was learning to recognize. Layla, 3, was more interested in the bread roll they had been served. "Daddy," Lucas asked in Arabic, his preferred language at the moment, "why is this table special?" Khalid looked at Marina, a smile on his lips. She nodded, indicating that he should tell the story. "Because, my son," Khalid said, picking Lucas up, "it was at this table that I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned that no person is invisible, that everyone deserves respect, no matter what their job is or where they come from. And I learned that from the wisest woman I have ever known, your mother." Lucas looked at Marina with wide eyes. "Mommy is everyone's teacher. Marina laughed, kissing her son's forehead. Not everyone's darling, but I try to teach what I can. And the most important lesson is the same one I teach you and your sister. Treat all people with kindness and respect, because you never know someone's full story just by looking at them. After the children were taken home by the nanny, Marina and Khalid remained alone at the table, savoring wine and reminiscing. "Do you ever regret it?" Khalid asked suddenly. "Giving me a second chance?" Marina took his hand across the table. "Never. You showed me that people can genuinely change when they find the right motivation, and you gave me a life I never imagined possible." She paused, her eyes shining. "But more importantly, you see me. Truly see me. Not the waitress, not the cultural specialist, not the billionaire's wife. Just Marina, and you love me for who I am." Khalid raised her hand to his lips. "How could I not love you? You saved me from becoming an empty man, rich in money but poor in humanity. You gave me purpose beyond profits. You gave me a family that loves me for who I am, not for what I possess. You gave me a life worth living." They clinked their glasses softly in the almost empty room. Marina's journey, from underestimated waitress to respected executive, from invisible woman to beloved partner, had been long and challenging, but every obstacle, every difficulty, every moment of doubt had been worth it, because in the end she had proven something fundamental, that human worth transcends professional titles, bank accounts, or social origin, that a single courageous action, a single moment of defended dignity, can change not just one life, but two. That true love knows no cultural boundaries when built on mutual respect and shared growth, and that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in the worst insults, just waiting for us to be brave enough to unwrap them. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Khalid's story has deeply touched your hearts. This journey of transformation and true love reminds us that every person we meet carries a story we don't know, and that respect and dignity are gifts we should offer to everyone, regardless of who they are. If this narrative resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories we lovingly prepare. Click the like button if you believe, like Marina and Khalid, that people can change and that true love overcomes all barriers. We want to know in the comments, would you have given Khalid a second chance? What lesson from this story touched your heart the most? Share your reflections with us. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human life. Until the next story, and remember, never underestimate the power of treating all people with dignity and respect.